feel responsible
Yes,
writing
you do.
things on your ballot.
It's okay, yeah. It's okay.
So, I think this debate is interesting. Very odd, I can't believe I'm the one that sat and voted off theory. So I voted for the affirmative off the theory shell. So I think that the app can only win if they're winning offense back to the theory shell, because there's not enough down on the substance debate, obviously. So yes, the neg does win substance. The arguments in terms of offense for the negative that he extends in the NR is not the same limits argument that you make in the first speech. You extend it in terms of justifications back to textuality, and or that's the only way that I heard it. So I have to weigh that offense as a link into the textuality standard the same way as I would evaluate the textuality arguments that Jackson makes on his own counterinterpretation on the first one. So first, it's not very clear to me what the app is extending because it's a new link into textuality. Second, there's not very many arguments back to the textuality arguments on Jackson's standard. I'm not even sure how you answer back a lot of them. He has some pretty good arguments, I think, in my opinion, that the way that we evaluate textuality is like based off consistency from 1999 to 2010. That's like a quasi-weighing argument. I don't get weighing arguments anywhere else. There's other offensive arguments that you just concede. I don't think you're answering them. So I think the app has some type of offense off of that standard. So now I have to figure out whether or not you have any link into any risk of offense coming off your standard either. So I don't think you do because you can see this argument that he makes about why both sides can read this position either as a plan or counterplan. But more preferably, I don't look to that argument just because I believe he's weighing off his standard. But first, I think this argument's dumb because you never explain why both sides can read it. It assumes that you're winning some other argument about why it's textual. So that's why I don't use that as the only reason for why I would prefer the arguments coming off his textuality standard. And second, I already explained how I would outweigh using his consistency arguments, or just the fact that I think you dropped a lot of his offense off that shell. All right, RBI. So I was confused as to whether or not the RBI debate started in the 1AR or in the NR because I didn't hear very much about an RBI in the 1AR. I'm not sure if you had an RBI in the 1AR, but it doesn't matter because the negative doesn't say, oh, he didn't read an RBI, just no RBIs. So that allows him to make RBI arguments in the 2AR. Plus, I feel like he does make arguments about why it's offensive and he should win the debate. You have two arguments. One, it's not drop the debater in the first place, so it's no reason that it's unreciprocal. And you don't say whether it's drop the debater or drop the argument. I'm not sure in CX whether or not you said it's drop the debater or drop the argument. But since he's saying I get the RBI, he's presuming that he can win off the theory debate regardless. It doesn't matter. You can't just say, oh, okay, it's drop the argument. All right, I didn't say it in the first place, but it is now, so no RBI there. So I still evaluate his RBI arguments. Your second argument is that it's not fair, and arguments about resolvability, and how you can just prep out the T debate and be ready for that. I'm not sure how this is an argument. I'm not positive how this is an argument against RBIs. Maybe I just didn't listen well enough. I think that it's a fine argument, but I feel like it resides on me feeling having some intuition that the argument should not have been read. If I think he's winning. If I think he's winning arguments about why it is a good offensive argument that you can read as an affirmative or a negative, then that would mean that I don't look to that no RBI argument. But like I previously said, I don't understand why it's a no RBI argument. Obviously, the AF wins I think the RBI because of just all of the arguments in the 2AR. I do think he makes some arguments about why he needs to be able to win off theory in the 1AR if these are new arguments anyways. So the reciprocal argument would be enough for me to see that there's an RBI since that argument was in both speeches. But other RBI arguments weren't. So even if I didn't have that RBI argument from the 1AR and 2AR, I didn't need to look at the other ones. So that's how I evaluate the theory debate. There's one thing that you do say at the very end of your speech. You say, oh, but theory, I know we normally presume it to come first, but you should just evaluate substance on the same level on theory. So I don't really know what to do with this because yes, we do look to theory all the time first, but there's a reason for that. Obviously, he doesn't make arguments for why that's true, but even if I had to weigh the offense coming off theory against the arguments from substance, at least he does try to extend arguments about why he would win substance. Anyways, then I'd have to do a lot more weighing back and forth between, do I look to the NC first, do I look to the theory shelf first, and I have no idea how to evaluate that. So since he does have some substantive arguments and he is winning theory, I just say, all right, you know what, I'm going to vote off theory because, yes, I do look to theory first because it criticizes arguments that were made in the round. Are there any questions?
Okay, so, in terms of, obviously, the RBI is what's important. I didn't even bother evaluating this theory debate, because if you lose the RBI, if you do, then it doesn't matter. So, in terms of the RBI, the way that, so I did hear the RBI in the 1AR. It was extremely short, but it was premised on, and the RBI for the totality of the round, at least in my view, was premised on the idea of it being unreciprocal. So he could win off of theory and you couldn't win off of theory, which is a problem if he's articulating it as he could win off of theory. So it's not that he's simply just asserting that it's not drop the debater, therefore it's not, you can't
So it's drop the
RBI.
argument, no RBI, he wins on substance.
What? Sorry?
So it's drop the argument, no RBI, drop the argument, he wins on substance.
Well, it's not just that. There's other reasons why I don't think you need the argument.
Okay.
But like in terms of that particular argument might be enough by itself because it's all your arguments are premised on the lack of reciprocity, and if it's not in fact unreciprocal, then it's a problem. The second reason why I think that even if that's not the case that you don't get the RBI is that I think you're mishandling the resolvability argument because he makes this argument in between the reciprocity argument and the argument about that it's illegitimately impacting his ability to run theory and check abusive positions. That's the argument in between it is that you don't win for being fair. This would mean in every round that we would have two debaters that would win when theory isn't run and it's irresolvable. So it's not a very smart argument, right? It doesn't make a ton of sense, but it's totally not an answer. Because you just say it has no impact, but it has a clear impact, which is that the implication of what you're saying is that I should win for not being abusive. And like that means that it's impossible to resolve the round, right? Which again, not a great argument, but a totally dropped argument. And it's sort of why you're in a rough position in a situation where it's just a theory debate going into the 2AR. Because he has a lot more time, even when he's not doing a amazing job, and you're not doing by any means an amazing job covering the theory debate. You just have so many little things to cover that it makes your life difficult. And the judge is in a position where they sort of feel like they have to like think about the arguments because he doesn't have a 3N. One thing I will say in terms of the way you address the theory argument, I think you have in a lot of senses better arguments, but the problem is you're so unclear. And it's not even in terms of you're speaking, because you're not that unclear. You just never slow down and contextualize the arguments together, right? Like he's giving us moments throughout the speech where he's like, this is what this means, this is how you think about it, and you're just doing none of the same, which is really problematic in a world in which you're depending on the judge like buying into your interpretation of how the theory debate's working in the 2AR, because that's all you've got, right? So you really need at the very least like some sort of overview at the beginning and end that's sort of like, this is what I'm going to do. All of his arguments about why it's drop the debater don't matter, and so on and so forth. Also, I agree that the neg could do it too is kind of a dumb argument because what if neither of you are supposed to be able to do it? Like you can't like run some plan about Russian presidency because if you don't let me do it, then the neg could do it too. No, it's just clearly not relevant. So that doesn't really give you any unique offensive argument with source theory.
Okay, yeah, I don't want on theory or T, I want on the NC. And I think that you're just not doing a good enough job on the RBI debate. I also think that you need to impact your reciprocity more clearly. Just as some sort of reason why it links fairness, it's obvious, but you're just not doing enough work on that, and especially in 1AR. I do have it as well, but it's just very, very short. I also think that Drew next time say what theory, how a judge should evaluate theory, because it makes it very difficult, if it's a 2-1, because it makes it very difficult, right, for someone to assume that it's dropped the debate or assume that it's dropped the argument.
I'm sorry, I just forgot. I mean, I did that last question because I theory too, so.
Okay, well, yeah.
Maybe I can fix that.
Let me clarify something really quickly after hearing their RFDs, their RFDs. So I think that obviously the clarity and the fact that this debate started a little bit later due to the nature of 1AR theory, that's why you also get a split in terms of this round. But in terms of the RBI argument that Jackson makes, if for some reason, there is if I don't believe that the shall has to be dropped the argument in the first place, there's not an argument against the reciprocity argument. There just isn't. So that's why I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'll take a look at his arguments about why I don't understand how your argument impacts into the theory of debate. Because that's what it is. I have no idea how this is a no RBI argument. It makes more sense after you say it. That's not what I got. I did not even hear it. I just heard this is not resolvable. He can prep out the T debate and something along those lines. It means it goes away. Drop the argument. So just be more clear on this, and this will resolve issues, especially with 1AR theory in the future.
One thing I will say, because we didn't talk about the substance debate at all, I think there was a lot of problems in the substance debate.
So much.
So you were just kind of saying it totally applies, and you were just saying it totally doesn't apply.
No,
So,
I agree with you.
yeah. So no, but like just in general for both of you, if you want to say that Enoch takes it out, you start to do this in the 2AR, but only very barely, and you just sort of say there's no warrant.
And I could just explain why.
You should just explain why. That like this is talking about things that put in sort of intent as morally important, and it has no place for intent. So the fact there's no distinction between intent and foresight makes no sense. Like that sentence, and all of a sudden it's clear. Why didn't you just say it? And in general, your entire NC was just like no warrant, no warrant, no warrant, and none of them had like a warrant for the no warrant.
Okay.
Sure.